One arrow past his nose would send him packing, said Robin, reaching for his bow. Waste of a good arrow, just look at him, Tuck scoffed. He's a beggar of a fellow, dressed in nothing but rags. He doesn't look as if he's eaten in a week, and he's carrying nothing but a staff. Don't you worry, Robin, I'll soon fix him. Robin and Much looked at the two men met on the bridge in the middle of the river. You strike first, Frere, said the stranger, and Friar Tuck swung up his great sword and struck. Again and again he struck, but the staff was always there, blocking the blow. He whirled his sword high above his head, thinking to cut the staff in two. The next moment his sword was sent flying into the water, and he found himself defenceless. The stranger smiled, and then thrust the end of his staff deep into Tuck's belly. Bent double, all the wind driven out of him, Tuck staggered towards the edge of the bridge, and the stranger's boot helped topple him over the side and into the river. With a roar like a bear, Much charged over to the bridge to get our fish, he cried. You'll have to pass me first. But you have no weapons, said the stranger. I need none, replied Much, as he lunged forward to grab the staff. The man stepped nimbly sideways as Much came at him, and simply prodded him into the river. At once Robin was on the bridge, an arrow strung to his bow and aimed at the man's heart. Move just one step, and I shall kill you. The stranger sighed and shook his head sadly. Is there no one in good King Richard's land who will give a poor fellow a meal, he said. Everywhere I go, I tell them I fought alongside the king in Holy Land, and what do they do but curse me and drive me out? Richard is dead, they say, and Prince John is as good a king in his place. It's not true, I tell them. Richard is not dead. He is held prisoner in Austria, and why? Because his brother John will not pay the ransom for his release, and they don't believe me. They think I'm mad, and they beat me black and blue. I've had enough. So shoot on, fine fellow. Your arrow holds no fear for me. Robin lowered his bow. You've given my friends a good soaking, he laughed, but anyone who is a friend of King Richard is our friend too. Come across and we'll eat the fish together. As the fish cooked slowly over the fire, the stranger could scarcely take his eyes from it. When it was ready, he ate it head to tail, stripping every morsel of pink flesh from the bone. The others looked on, mouths watering. I hope it chokes you, said Friar Tuck, smarting from ducking in the river. The stranger reached over and picked up Tuck's sword. A fine weapon, he said, running his thumb along the edge of the blade, but blunt. What do you know of weapons, said Friar Tuck, snatching back his sword. I told you, I was a soldier with the king in the Holy Land, but more than that, I was the king's armourer, and with these hands I made the King of England's sword, the sword that cut great swathes through the silken hordes. Oh, my king, and he began to weep, burying his head in his hands. Robin and Much and Tuck looked at each other and smiled. Friend, Robin began, did you say you were an armourer, a smith? The man nodded behind his hands. Tuck crossed himself and closed his eyes. Now God be thanked, he breathed. Didn't I tell you, Robin? Didn't I now? It's God's good grace has brought him here. Robin pulled the man's hand gently from his face. Friend, come live with us in Sherwood. Make our swords for us, sharpen our spears, and then we can deal Prince John, the Sheriff of Nottingham, such a blow they'll never forget. Do it for the king. The stranger smiled through his tears. So, he said, so the spirit of England still lives. I'll stay, and I'll make you the daggers and the swords and shields and spears you need to clear the vermin from King Richard's land. What shall we call you? Robin asked. My name is John Little, but my king always called me Little John, because I was twice his size. Call me that, for it will always remind me of him when you do. Through that autumn and winter, Little John's forge was never out. By Christmas, every man, woman and child had their own each weapon, each one perfectly weighted and deadly sharp. The children loved to watch him at work and to his unveil, and to see the sparks fly and the gush of streams rising as he plunged the glowing iron into the bucket. It was the warmest place to be, and they would stay and listen long into the night as Little John told them the Holy Land, and of the wars he had fought alongside good King Richard. Christmas that year was like no other. All through the feasting they knew their time of testing was coming, and for many of them this might be their last Christmas. The outlaw band that swelled now to over 200, all of them strong in body and spirit, all of them ready to fight the good fight. Mass was the longest they had never known, partly because much time was given to Friar Tuck's extortions, and partly because he insisted that the high time for couples to be married and their children to be blessed in the sight of God. Last of all to be joined together were Robin and Marion. As they knelt for their blessing, Tuck prayed over them. God's good grace brought you together and brought us all to this place. May you and your children and all of us live a long and godly life. The amens echoed loud through the cave, and afterwards the Christmas feasting went on long into the night, though Robin and Marion stole away well before the end of it. Will our baby have white hair like me or black hair like yours? Marion whispered as they lay together in each other's arms. It does not matter, said Robin. So long as he grows up a free man, nothing else matters. Well, I want him to have white hair so that when he grows old, no one will ever know it. And anyway, he may be a girl. But Robin did not hear. He was asleep already. The baby was born as the first leaves of autumn fell, a baby boy, and Marion's wish came true. The boy had white hair. He was baptized Martin after his grandfather. Chapter 7. The Silver Arrow. All this while Guy of Gisborne had still not been idle. He was gathering evidence to prove that Robin Hood was still alive. He was convinced of it, so convinced that he would never have dared to venture into Sherwood himself. Word from his spies had left no doubt in his mind. Robin Hood was gathering about him in Sherwood a small army of malcontents and rebels. True, no one had actually seen Robin Hood in person for 3 years or more now, and in all that time no one had robbed travellers on the road through Sherwood. But the stories about Robin and his outlaws had spread like the plague, into every back street, into every tavern. Sir Guy had heard it in his own ears. One man, about to die at the end of a rope, declared with an absolute conviction, "Robin will avenge us." And then he died, defiant with faith, his eyes burning with it till they closed in death. They were eyes that haunted Sir Guy of Gisborne. Robin the Good, they called him, Saint Robin, Sheriff of Sherwood. To some he was a friendly sprite, a jack of the green, and a part of living to the forest. To others he was dead indeed, but like Jesus Christ before him, he would come back to save them. There was even a rumour that Robin Hood was the true son of the imprisoned King Richard, and so heir to the English throne. What Sir Guy of Gisborne knew for certain was frightening enough. Robin Hood lived. He was a bowman without equal in the land. He could split a willow wand at 500 paces. He could do it every time, wind or rain, and the outlaws in Sherwood would follow him anywhere. Worst of all, and most dangerous of all, the people loved him. Time and time again, Sir Guy of Gisborne tried to persuade the sheriff that Robin Hood was still alive. Every stag's head his men found he threw down at the sheriff's feet. I tell you, my lord sheriff, he insisted yet again, he lives, he has followers, maybe hundreds of them by now, and he has weapons. He will come against us with his outlaws, and when he does, none of us will be safe in our beds. But the sheriff had had enough. What in hell's name is the matter with you, Guy? He stormed. We've seen neither hide nor hair of the man in years, and all you have is stories, tavern tittle-tale, and a few stags' heads. Anyone can kill a stag. But, my lord sheriff, no buts. The sheriff banged the table and leapt to his feet in a terrible rage. I've listened enough to your buts, but you have yet to be in the forest to look for him. No, of course you haven't. You're gutless. I'm surrounded by cowards and imbeciles. I'll show you. To prove to you once and for all that I'm right, that Robin Hood is dead, and dead as a doornail. I shall go myself into Sherwood. And what's more, I shall go alone. And after I return, if anyone even speaks the name of Robin Hood again in my hearing, I'll have his tongue out. Do you hear me? And snatching up his sword and helmet, he strode out of the hall, leapt onto his horse, and galloped away over the drawbridge. In the market square, his escort made up the mount and came after him. But he waved them back. I do not need you, nor anyone, he thundered. I ride through Sherwood alone. I'm not frightened of a ghost, not Robin Hood, not anyone. So they let him go. But his last words had been heard by everyone in the market square, including a charcoal burner whose family had been put out their house by the sheriff, and were only kept alive through the cold months of winter by Robin and his outlaws. He knew what had to be done, and were more than happy to do it. The sun was high and hot by the time the sheriff reached the shade of Sherwood. Glad though he was not to be cool again, the sheriff had no intention of staying in Sherwood any longer than he had to. Never in his life had he ventured alone into Sherwood, even before the days of Robin Hood. For Robin Hood was not the only danger lurking in Sherwood. Deep in the forest there were wolves too. And then his temper cooled at last. A sudden terrible thought came to him. Maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong. Maybe Robin Hood was still alive after all, still there in Sherwood. He reined in his horse and looked anxiously about him. This was far enough. He would hide himself away amongst the trees for an hour or two, and then ride back in triumph to Nottingham. Neither Sir Guy of Gisborne nor anyone would ever know the difference. He led his horse into a thicket, and tied it up, sat down to sleep off his lunch. He had had 2 bottles of wine, so sleep came easily enough. When he woke, he found himself surrounded by peering, grinning faces, a dozen or more. Some were dwarfs, and then some were hunchbacks too. But they were not dressed in rags as he remembered them. Each one wore the same Lincoln green, and each one carried a sword, a bow, and a quiver of arrows. The sheriff knew at once that there were outlaws, and shrank back in horror. "We won't kill you," said one of them, smiling from ear to ear. "We've been sent to ask you for supper. Will Scarlet killed a stag, a beauty, a real beauty. We kept it for a special occasion. You're the special occasion." They helped him to his feet. "I think I'd better be getting back," said the sheriff, backing away, but they held him fast. "After supper, perhaps," said the same outlaw, looking up to his face. "We wouldn't want to disappoint our master now, would we? We're cooking it specially for you." The sheriff had no choice but to brave it.